Welcome back to Vegucation. Today we are talking about why vegan, what we label ourselves as, what our story is, how we got here today to be with you.
Absolutely.
So, speaking of that,
Yes.
what would you label yourself as today in the eating world?
You know, I'm a label lover. And if I were to label myself, I would go with either a vegan adjacent, plant-based adjacent, or flexitarian. I wish I had a muscle when I did that.
We could work on that.
We will.
Also,
What does that mean?
adjacent.
Yes.
Please bring me full spectrum as to how we got to that word.
I'm going to bring it around town. Watch this. So adjacent is like you're almost there, but you're not there yet. You're real close.
Is
I'm
that-
vegan adjacent.
So that's when, like, you see a red light, but it's yellow, so you decide to proceed through when you could have stopped?
Well, I almost would think of it the other way. It's like you stopped at a yellow light and let it turn red. Either way, most of the time I try to make really strong plant-based choices. They may not always be the healthiest, but I really try to stay away from meat. I try to stay away from dairy. I try to stay away from eggs. I am not perfect, hence the adjacent and the flexitarian, because I do love a good piece of salmon, and I'll call it a struggle because I have a really hard time not eating salmon, but I try really hard with a lot of other things, and so that's kind of where I am. And to back up a little bit just to like how I got there, it's like you said, I grew up in a household of meat and dairy eaters.
Yep.
And I grew up having, this is like TMI, I'm getting ready to get you guys all into my situation, but I grew up with chronic constipation. And I remember the first time I experienced constipation away from home while I was in college, I cried.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a Leah in my life. I didn't have anybody to really help me to look at and examine what I was putting into my body, because that's fueling everything that my body does.
Yeah, and I think so many people, if you don't grow up in a family where health correlates back to food,
Right.
I think a lot of people's families have the understanding that you're either healthy or you're not.
Right.
Either you have good genetics or you have bad genetics.
Genetics is, I hear that so much.
So much.
But genetics relates to food because where do you get your eating habits from?
Right, and all of the research on epigenetics, showing that your lifestyle is what actually turns on those genetic markers.
Oh, interesting.
You can have them your entire life, but even if you're the best plant-based person on the planet, if my stress level is at a 95, I can kiss my good diet out the window because my body's in chronic fight or flight, and I'm never going to be at a good spot health-wise. So there's so many facets. It's not just your diet, right? It's your lifestyle. It's your stress level. How much do you drink alcohol?
How active you are.
How active are you? But even, on the active side, this is something we can touch on a little bit too. So many people think more is better.
Yeah.
Well, specifically for women, it's really not. You want to have, and we're going to talk about on our fitness episode, 2 to 3 workouts per week. You really don't need anything crazy above that. But you've got so many women who are like, I work out
every
6 days a week. I drink pre-workout every morning. I'm going insane. My adrenals are dead.
Going insane.
Yeah. They're like jazzed all the time. But again, it's still stress on the body.
Absolutely.
A workout is stress on the body, even though internally for us and mentally it can feel like such a release.
So I talked about my label. Do you consider yourself vegan?
So I feel like I'm afraid of that word.
Okay.
There's a lot of responsibility that comes along with calling yourself a vegan.
Such as.
Such as, vegan is more of you're dedicating your life to make sure the products you use are vegan, the shoes you wear are vegan, the clothing you wear, like nothing in your life and animal has been harmed. And for me, it was a lot of responsibility that I was just not ready for. Kind of like kids. A lot of responsibility. So I would call my husband and I plant-based, although I still am very cautious. I still care about the products and ingredients I put on my skin. Tennis shoes is one area we could improve in because we do buy a lot of tennis shoes and I know they are not vegan.
Okay.
So there are some areas, but we're not perfect, but we're pretty darn good.
Yeah.
We're better than the average. And that's what I mean for you guys. Even if you were plant-based once a week, once a month,
Yeah.
that's better than nothing. So we're not trying to reach that
We're not looking for perfection. We'll just take progress. We're looking for progress for you.
Yeah. But what really led me down that health journey was, it was probably mid-20s when I really started to have issues. I was having back problems. They were prescribing tons of medications, steroids every time my back went out, pain pills, which make you extremely constipated. And everything just started to cycle. And that led me to vegetarianism, because I was like, okay, well, a lot of people say they feel great as a vegetarian.
Okay.
So I was like, let me try out this lifestyle. And then I was vegetarian for probably 7 or 8 years until I met my husband.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Still eating a lot of dairy, not enough greens.
Yeah.
Really going towards like the cheese pizza, cheese pasta, cheese everything.
Like basically
route.
just if there's no meat on it, I'm good.
Yes, 100%. And I felt better, but I didn't feel that much better. And I really was toying with the idea of going vegan, but my husband and I were like, I love eggs. And, occasionally we'd throw some fish in there because everyone's like, you need fish to survive.
Yeah. So was Jay vegetarian when you met him, or was he a meat
Lord,
eater?
No.
No?
Jay was a hot dog eating boy from Pontiac. Yeah, no. I remember some of our first days dating, and he would send me photos of his food, and I was like, oh, mac and cheese with a side of cheese and a hot dog with cheese in it. It was great.
A lot of meat, a lot of dairy.
Yeah, a lot of meat, a lot of dairy. He was definitely not vegetarian. I don't think he ever had any plans to go vegetarian. But when my husband had met me, he'd just lost like 60 pounds.
Oh, wow.
He'd had an injury, and he'd always been a really big guy his entire life. And when he hurt his ankle and he wasn't active, he gained a whole lot of weight because he was eating like he was still active. So he had just lost a bunch of weight, so he was already getting on the health train, working out. He'd given up fast food, drinking pop or soda, whatever you call it. And so we were both on the page of wanting to be healthy long term. And I think for him, a big driver, his dad's had heart problems. His grandpa died of heart disease. And I don't know if you have this saying, but I always have this saying that the big guys die first. And I don't want my husband to die. So I was like, no.
Yeah.
We're going to do everything that we can to make you live longer than me.
So it was easy to convince him to do that, because with Brian, very similar story, his family history on his father's side, on the male side of his family, like he did not want to repeat history. And so that was one of the things that made it really easy for him to jump on board and support me and say, I'll do it too.
Yeah, I think it's that fear. Again, men are always the strong one at home. Even if they have health problems going on, they don't talk about it.
Oh, gosh,
They have a
no.
lot of unresolved stress, right? Because they have to carry the burden of the household, especially if you have kids. That's an added level of pressure, right? I have to be the provider. This has to happen. And so I think they have an unwritten amount of stress that's never really, I don't think we talk about it.
And they don't like to talk in general, most men.
Most men do
So
not.
They don't communicate through it.
Yes.
And it just kind of gets buried underneath the hot dog or
Yeah.
Beyond brought.
But I'm always so proud now because my husband's nutrition knowledge, and what he's able to make for people when they come over and they're like, oh my gosh, this is plant-based or vegan. And he's like, yes, let me show you more. And I think that, especially because my husband's 6'6", he's a really big guy. And I think it changes the stigma when someone can see a guy like him thriving and surviving on a plant-based diet. It's different.
Yeah, it kind of is a little bit more relatable and maybe makes people think like, well, maybe I can give this a try. He's not like a little scrawny guy. He's a big dude.
He's a big guy, and he's still powerlifting. He's still lifting multiple days a week. He plays, baseball, and so I think that there's a lot of guys that are coming over this way and realizing we're seeing a drop in testosterone for men. It's a big problem in this world that we'll talk about on our men's episode of hormones. And, a lot of plant-based men just don't have that dip in testosterone that a lot of the other animal eating men do.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about why be vegan, why go vegan. We're going to take a little break, but we will be right back with more of education.